Hey, thanks for checking out another episode of Triple Play, and don't forget to support those that support us. We like to thank our sponsor, Brookes Bible College, for sponsoring this episode. If you're considering a biblical or biblical counseling degree, consider Brookes Bible College. We really enjoy their partnership, and all their information's in the show notes. That said, too, if you're a lay person and you just want to get deeper into God's Word, it's another good place that you can check out. And if you're looking to go into missions and you don't want to have a lot of debt, consider them. They're a great biblical Bible college, and you'll come out with little to no debt, and that's rare in this day and age. So, that said,
who do we got today?
Well, we got a returning guest, but he brought his bride with him this time. So we got Pastor Jerry Marshall and Miss Cindy Marshall, and we're excited to have them today because as this episode drops, it will be Valentine's, and we're excited to learn a little bit about their secret recipe to a successful marriage, right? So
we're talking on the way here that really there is no secret formula. And probably any couple that's been married a lot of years has the things they thought worked and enhanced their marriage and worked well for them. Ours may be different.
But I think we can learn from.
Yeah.
You know, the Bible says when you walk with the wise, you'll become wise. So I always try to learn and glean a little bit of wisdom. And one thing I know is I look back on my younger self. I'm 49, been married 23 years, and I look back on my younger self, and there's things that I'm like, you are such a knucklehead. If you'd only gotten this a little sooner, it would have really helped out your marriage, or this would have really helped out your life. And so, you know, hopefully in this episode, people will listen in, and maybe they'll save themselves from being maybe a knucklehead like me, or you know, understand their spouse maybe a little bit more. One of the number one things I get calls about, just in general from friends or people that know me, is usually marriage advice, because it's such a struggle in a secular world for most people. So, and the temptations are real. So, everywhere, we were just talking about a gym. Everywhere you go, the scantily dressedness, the lack of couthfulness in this society. So, the openness. You know, there's an openness. I mean, it's been gravitating more and more, but today it's gone to a whole new level. I mean, and acceptability. I mean, it's been acceptable, but again, just, you know, I look back 20, 30 years ago, if you were divorced or if you had an affair, that was kind of still shunned by society to some degree. Now it's just like, oh, that person, no big deal. They are. Right. It was not unnatural to see, but it was just not natural to everybody. Still kind of had that little, like, that's not quite right. And you don't see that moral aptitude in today's culture like you did back then, you know.
When we were kids, people would speak about divorce in hushed tones.
Yes.
Yeah. You hear about the Jones, you know.
And it was very scandalous.
Scandalous. Right. And that was back in the late 1950s, early 60s. But then the culture really changed, and especially as it relates to marriage. Nowadays, marriage is basically optional in many people's minds. I saw a talking head on TV say that she thought that in a decade or so, marriage wouldn't even be around anymore. And of course, I totally disagree with that. It's been around for many years. Continues to be. So Cindy and I have been married for going on 56 years.
Oh, wow.
In April. Yeah. Consecutively to the same woman.
That's awesome.
It's a long time.
Yeah, marriage isn't going anywhere. I mean, God said that at the end, people will be given into marriage and married.
That's right. All the way in the end time. So it's still going to happen. Yeah. And so I think if I were to take a review and go back over our married life, our history, I would say the first 3 years were very rough. We did not know Christ.
Right.
I was involved in professional music. I wasn't around that much. There was the lifestyle that went along with that. I was engaged in that as well. So we had a rough period of time until I remember one time when there was a tragedy almost that happened with me and the use of drugs. And she sat on the end of the bed and said, our life has to change.
Yes.
And, we looked at each other and we said, but how?
Yeah.
How do you change this whole, treadmill that we found ourselves on? How do we go to a different place? And eventually that led to us both coming to know Jesus Christ as our Lord and Savior. And if I were to tell anybody, is there a secret? And I would say that if there's a truth, and that is that if you come to know Christ, you will become a new creature. And part of becoming a new creature in Christ is a deliverance. I mean, if you allow the Spirit of God to work in your life, a deliverance from self-centeredness, because a marriage to work requires two people who are committed to not being all self-absorbed, and they're committed to each other's best. And we learned that. I think that became revolutionary. It wasn't so much about me demanding what I wanted from the marriage. It was about both of us demanding what is best for the marriage. That's a whole different thing. But those early years were tough until we came to know Christ. And even when I do pre-marriage counseling, one of the things that I say is the secret to that marriage being fulfilling and lasting has more to do with your relationship with the Creator in marriage than your mate in marriage. And if you have an intimate relationship with Him, you are better able, to maneuver the difficulties that you encounter along the way.
And it still took time to work out the previous pattern we had, because we're new believers in Christ. I mean, that's a process of growing in the Lord and becoming sanctified, but it wasn't overnight. All of a sudden, everything was wonderful and everything is great. It was a process of being a new creature in Christ, old things leaving, old patterns, old habits leaving, and new ones replacing them. But that takes time.
A while.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like to tell people when I became born again, prior to it being born again, I was not such a good husband and not such a good father. Then the day after I became born again, I was not such a good husband and not such a good father. I needed to learn. As a matter of fact, when I was at Moody training for ministry, they ran us through a class on counseling, biblical counseling. And the professor was talking about those principles that we needed to convey about marriage. And little did he know, he was counseling me that for many of those principles, that was the first time I ever saw him or, understood that needed to be a part of my life. So I remember that very, very well. That was a turning point where I started to say, wait a minute, my parenting and my, being married needs some drastic changes in new direction. So that was very helpful.
Well, I want to rewind first real quick. Sure. How did you guys meet?
I like this story.
It's a real funny story. You may lose some listeners over this one.
Not the long dragged out.
Yeah, okay.
The short version.
As I told you, I used to be playing professionally in the band. And we used to play a lot in the city of Chicago in a place called the In Motion. It was a teenage nightclub. There was no alcohol. It was, Pepsi and Coke, not the kind of Coke you snip, but the one you drink.
Nope, nobody brought drinks in. Nobody brought
So, but in any event, I was playing there one time, and in those days, on the sides of the stage, they would have these cords, these golden cords, so it looked like almost a cage on both sides with these golden cords coming down. You'd have to picture it. And then they would have girls dancing in that when you were playing. Well, lo and behold, she was one of the girls dancing.
All right, so we got a dancer.
Okay, for people who don't know what that is, back in the day, they called them go-go boots. You wear white.
I was going to say go-go girl.
Yeah.
Go-go girl.
Yeah. You know.
Yes. Okay. That was what I did.
Yeah. So that's the first time I saw her, and we saw each other. And I'm not sure we really, probably just greeted one another or something of that nature. But later on, I was playing at somebody's Halloween party. The band was playing, and she was there. And I saw her standing off on the side there. And to tell you the truth, I was almost afraid to approach her because, us guys, we don't want to get, she's a knockout, gorgeous 17, 18-year-old, whatever she was at that time. And I'm thinking, I'm going to go there and talk to her, and she might say, hey, get out of here, who are you? But I talked with her, and she talked back, and we talked for a long time, and finally asked her out, and then we started dating, and eventually, I don't know how many years later, it was that much long.
Maybe about a year and a half.
Year and a half, we got married later. So that's how we met, though. Again, keep in mind, folks,
It was
we
a
did not know
different time.
Christ.
It was
Yeah, no,
And this was all in Chicago. How long did you guys stay in Chicago for?
40 years.
40 years.
40 years.
Oh, wow.
We were born and raised in Chicago.
And went from there, came to St. Louis
Yeah.
after 40 years of living up there with family and friends and everything. It was
Right.
our first big move away. So
you're knocking on 40 years here then.
and then we've been here for 37 years.
Yeah, almost.
So who's your baseball team?
White Sox.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, we weren't Cub fans. Well,
Oh no, we were South
Let's take it back.
South Side.
if you're asking me who's my baseball team now, it's the Cardinals.
Yes,
Okay.
but back in the day, South Side and North Side of Chicago are two different worlds.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
The
Yeah.
rivalry there. So we were South Side. White
But you'd
Sox.
rather go to a Cubs game, though, right? Wrigley?
We were hoping
if
when
they
the
were playing
Cardinals
the White
played the
Sox.
Cubs, they'd say, "Who are you going to cheer for now that you're in St. Louis?" We said, "Well, we're not cheering for the Cubs because we never liked them when we lived in Chicago."
Yeah, nobody did. We on the South Side.
South Side, right?
But I did cheer for him when he went to the World Series.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because that, what did they say? Anybody can have
or
a
something.
Mm-hmm.
bad century.
They're the stuck-up team.
Yeah.
Anybody can have a bad century. Well, I recall,
Anybody can. It's true.
125 or 105 years.
108. It was the number of, I remember that because it was the number of years was the number of seams on a baseball.
Oh, wow.
And you know the story? Okay, so in 1918, I think it was 1918. 1918, they won the last World Series, Boston? Or Chicago, 1904.
Wow. Wells Farrier.
Yeah, in 1904, the story goes that they put a goat on the field and the goat
that
hexed the team,
Right,
and they
right.
hexed it for the amount of seams on the baseball. For
Oh, I see.
Interesting.
there you go. Well, all I can say is it took them 118 years. Since that time, man invented electricity, went to the moon and back,
Yes. Yeah.
developed iPhones.
Yeah.
So another 100 and
When I was a young man, when I walked into Wrigley Field, my first thought is, I could hit one out of here.
Small.
if it's windy enough,
Yeah, if it's small.
it's
Yeah.
true. That's a good place
Yeah.
to hit.
yeah.
It is.
So you came back from Chicago to St. Louis.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so you learned. I was actually going to ask you. So these lessons that you had in college, what were some of the ones that you immediately, as you're going through that class in counseling, that you recognized? Hey, I need to tune in on these because obviously they were good principles to you. I'm sure people listening would probably find they're good for them.
Well, it's kind of funny because one of the things that he talked about was that that men need to learn to communicate and romance their wives, and I knew about what communication meant, but I wasn't quite sure about what romance meant, exactly. I mean, I had my ideas. And so I went home and I remember asking her, I said, how can I learn to be romantic with you? And she said, well, you can help me wash the dishes.
Help me with the dishes. Yes.
And I said,
What?
what is that? I'm thinking I'm going to have to go buy flowers and dinner and all of that. And she said, basically I asked her why. And she said, because when you help me with that, number one, it helps when you got little boys running around at that time. And then number two, I have your undivided attention. You're not watching TV. You're with me at the sink. And then she said, another thing is when you're out, she loves Snickers bars. Now, she eats a Snicker bar over a period of 6 months.
Well, not quite that long. I just I cut off like a little half or 3/4 of an inch at a time.
Yeah.
Have that, wrap it up, put it in the
Buy
refrigerator.
fun size ones now.
Yeah, they got
Yes,
the bigger
now they have fun size. Yeah.
And we don't have too much life left. I
That
don't know
was
if
my,
she'd be able to
that
finish
was
it.
my fun size, and then I'll have a little more another day, and it took time.
Yeah. And I asked her why, and she says, because it means that in the middle of the day you thought about me. So
He
you
would
wanted
buy, pick up a Snickers bar once in a while.
Yeah.
And he said, what does that mean? I said, well, that means that sometime during that day you thought about me and went and took the effort to go pick up something, get a Snickers bar, something I love, and bring it home. That says a lot to me.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
And I think the other thing that I learned that I thought was pretty significant is men, I think maybe women do it too, but men tend to determine the well-being of their marriage based upon their own needs of a marriage.
Right.
And they're not thinking about their mate in marriage and their needs. And like, for example, we came from two different types of families. Mm-hmm. She came from an Italian family, very relational, come on in, move the papers, sit down, that kind of place. Versus mine, which was the only time I ever touched my brothers or my brothers touched me, was generally to break something or draw blood. So it was not hugging and
Loving,
stuff like that.
tender.
And my mom was a neatnik. You'd hardly finish your food, and she's got the plate gone and washed, and so we got married, and so we had conflict
Yes.
over the way the house was.
Right.
That was one thing. But the other thing was she loves to be hugged. She'd, hold her hand, and we would be newly married, and I'd be sitting on the couch, and she'd say, "Come over here and sit by me." And I'd say, "Why?"
Why?
Are we comfortable?
Yeah, he did. He'd say, I'm comfortable, you're comfortable. Why would I want to come over there?
And I had to learn
Yes.
that was a need, and it wasn't really about me. I could do that. That wasn't beyond my ability. I could do that. So I started doing that. I remember when I first started hugging her, she was washing dishes, and I came back from, I don't know, the church or school or whatever, and I walked up to her and I put my arms around her, and this is, I'm ashamed to say it, but this is my
Yes.
thought. And
You got to hear this.
I thought, I hope she's getting something from this.
And I loved it. It's like,
She loved
that's
it.
so sweet. I loved it.
Yeah, and because me
He
at
did
that
it
point,
mechanically,
it
but
wasn't something I thought that I needed. Now the thing is, over the years,
Right.
I really enjoy that. Yeah. But I had to look at her in my marriage and say, I can't measure the well-being of my marriage based on my needs being met.
right.
I have to look at her. And then she looks toward me. And so we're basically trying to outdo each other and meeting each other's needs. And that's a lot better than fighting about it.
Yeah.
So that's very
It's
important.
actually fun
It's fun.
and satisfying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To do.
I actually love to be with her. I mean, I love going home and, just being with her during the night and watching a program together, whatever we do, and I know of some guys that worked overtime because they didn't want to go home.
Right.
They became workaholics because it was too hard. At work, they got rewarded, but at home, they were criticized or something and they didn't want to go. Yeah. But, so it's good to have an environment like that.
Mm-hmm.
What I heard you say, I'm just wondering, is first of all, one of the greatest things a marriage can have is a good spiritual foundation.
It does.
Yep.
And then from there, have an understanding of your wife's love language.
Yeah.
Really, what you asked her when you're saying what is romantic to you.
Right.
She said this act of service plus this touch, right? Acts of service and touch. Mm-hmm. So finding out what your wife's love language, so that you can find, and vice versa, right? So as you guys said, then you go into the mode of how can I outserve that person in the marriage.
To me, that meant more than flowers or jewelry or anything. That meant much more to me. That conveyed love more to me than if he brought flowers home.
I've had my wife is the exact same way. I have brought nice things home, gold, and earrings, and
They're nice, but
they sit on a shelf. But take time out, go on a hike with her.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah, we walk together a lot.
Yeah.
We like doing that. Interesting thing about the love languages, that was my professor, the guy who wrote that book,
Oh,
Mr. Chapman.
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there you go. So,
I've read that book.
Yeah.
I read that book.
Yeah.
yeah.
Maybe he was in the process of writing that book when
That's
he taught
funny.
the class.
Must have been, because I don't remember him having the book at that time. Now they have at Moody, they have an entire building dedicated to him. It's a counseling building where they teach on, biblical counseling.
Yeah.
But that was a very important thing, and you mentioned it, the importance of having both of you growing together spiritually, really significant, because it tends to trim the flesh. You have a decreasing frequency of sin and flesh behavior, and increasing frequency of that which is right and righteousness, and that comes from growth. And so that's when I'm doing pre-marriage counseling, I'll often turn to the man and I'll remind him that day when you make those vows, spiritual growth is no longer an option for you. You have to grow, because your family can't go any further than where you're at.
Yeah, they can't go where you you can't lead them where you've not gone.
That's right.
So, or aren't going. So,
Yeah.
I agree on that. And the other thing I always say, kind of on that same note, is when you start having kids,
Yeah.
more is caught than is taught.
Yeah.
So you can tell them
Yes.
these principles, but if they don't see you living out those principles, and that includes grace, okay, that doesn't mean you're perfect.
Right.
No.
It means when you make a mistake that you acknowledge it, that you openly ask for forgiveness from your spouse or who you harmed, and in that way, there can be full healing done, and they can see where the grace is in that life.
Right.
So,
Yeah, and I think it's important that your relationship is as strong as it can be when you're rearing children,
Yes.
because children can be a challenge to your marriage,
Right.
especially if you're not on the same page, and constantly quibbling about that. It can really be destructive. And so, yeah, it took us a little while in that area as well. I mean, to just, I'm the typical guy that, the kids would be, we had 3 boys, and they were just boys.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And she'd come home, and I'd come home, and it'd be running around. I'd say, well, let's just break the leg of one of them. That way we have a sample, here's an example, boys. And of course, she was always, and it was good for me because it conditioned, even my temperament and such. When they would do something really bad. One time, I just got my car. It was from the church we were at. We got a newer car, and the garage is down. You go down, and I went down, and all of a sudden the front wheels exploded.
Were you going fast?
No.
What happened was my
There's a
boys.
story
We
here.
had a big acre of land or something with the parsonage back then, and the boys thought that they would help by using
Those metal
garden rakes.
metal,
The metal
rakes.
things.
Yeah.
like,
And then when they were done, they just decided to leave them
on the
there,
driveway.
right in the.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Boy, when that happened, and he
They
came
the boys said,
in,
"He's going to kill us, Mom." He's gonna kill us."
Dad's going to kill us. He's not going to kill you, but yes, this is
small
serious.
Yeah.
Oh, my.
But I mean, it's a challenge. I mean, I had to call a tow service because how could I do that? I mean, the car was
Way down.
down, now am I going to get the wheels off in the front? I only had one spare.
It's got to be level.
You
Change.
got to be level, yeah. So they came and they did that. But anyways,
Yes.
you have those moments, when your kids really
And the
do
flesh
something
comes out.
and the flesh comes out. And so it's best that you're spiritually advancing continuously so you can get a better hold on that,
Yeah.
on the flesh and the impulses of the flesh. But rearing children can bring difficulty into a marriage, especially when you're not on the same page.
Yes. And
There are
kids know
times-
who to go to.
Right.
They know who they can,
Right.
appeal to and get them more
Yeah.
sympathetic ear.
Yeah,
Mom or dad.
Yeah.
Kids will use that.
I know that. So especially, when you have that moment, that crisis moment, where the better thing to do is before you react, go off parents by themselves into their bedroom or something and say, okay, what are we going to do here? So got a united front.
Yeah.
Because if your kids know that there's a division, boy, they'll play that division until they win, So in any event, that's a very important part of the marriage.
Yeah. Cindy, what are some of the things you have learned that have helped you in the marriage to your husband?
One thing I think is you have to know what hill to die on. In other words, not every disagreement do you have to go to the death to get your point across. To give each other grace, to be patient with each other, allow the Holy Spirit to work in relationship when you're not on the same page, to kind of, bring to mind things that we each need to do under the conviction of the Spirit. But being very patient, a lot of things need time, time to process, time to work things out. So I think being patient, especially when we were first married, he was very impatient. And, so learning to be patient with his impatience helped. And he's not anymore like that, but he was. In those days, those early years were a struggle, But learning to be patient with each other, give each other room, give each other grace, allow the Lord to work.
Yeah.
On both of our rough edges. We both have them. I mean, everybody does, but
Oh yeah.
Do you think
patient.
that people have a tendency to idolize their marriages, make it more meaningful and more on the hierarchy of life than it needs to be? And how does it get like that?
Well, that life itself is a mixture of priorities. Sometimes I even say it's a mixture of a bunch of number ones. Like your marriage is number one, your children are number one, your relationship with Christ is number one, your relationship with your children is number one, and it's trying to give the necessary time to all of them. You're a man, especially for us men, we're constantly dealing with competing time demands. Am I going to give enough time to my marriage, to my kids, to my job? A lot of times if you're working for somebody, they're not really interested in how you're doing with your marriage. They're interested in the bottom line and whatever productive part you play in it. But that I think is the problem. You can get something out of whack. You can even get children. There's some certain people who almost, I remember, I think it was R.C. Sproul, who wrote an article years ago called The New Idolatry of Evangelicalism. And he said, he described it as children worship. And then so in other words, you push something way beyond what it should be. So it's trying to keep, I've got to my marriage and I got to care for it. I've got my relationship with Christ. I got to care for it. I've got to serve my church if I can. I've got to do my best job when I'm working. So I probably because I'm a man, but I have a tendency to be concerned about my brothers, my younger brothers especially, because I know they're in that situation. They got the little ones, and many of them are trying to climb the corporate ladder. They got that particular pressure, and they want to go into growth level opportunities at church, but they can't always make them because they've got this and that pulling and tugging on them. So it's really, you can. It's a long answer to say, you can elevate your marriage beyond everything else, or you can elevate your children beyond everything else. There's some people who, after their kids get married and sent off, they get divorced because the marriage really wasn't that good. They were only living together to keep the household together for the kids.
And one of the things I was going to say, right, piggybacking off you on that would be, I've often seen people who idolize the success of their kids.
Oh, yeah.
So everything they live for is their kid being successful. And then we go all in.
Right.
And nothing matters more than little Timmy or little Johnny. Right. Making it, whatever it is. It could be educationally. I mean, we had Alex in here not so long ago, and he was talking about the immense pressure he felt for success at a young age.
Yeah.
and to be a perfectionist, whether it be in the piano or karate or in his academics. And it can be very, very driven towards that as well, where that becomes idolization. It's
Well, I always tell people who have all their kids are believers, they love the Lord, want to serve the body of Christ. I tell them every morning, get on your face and thank God and take no credit.
That's right.
Because it's an amazing thing when that happens to you. There are a lot of believers believing parents who are doing everything right, and they still have children that are dead in their trespasses and sins, and they're just
Walk away.
causing trouble in their home and all of those things. And so it's really the intervention of God if your kids are all saved and love the Lord. And it's instead of, taking credit or, almost worshiping them, you should really worship the one who made them the way they are. Because I know of parents that are, and many parents feel guilty. I would often say parenting for me was a tremendous and at the same time very embarrassing.
Having your daughter pull the fire alarm at church.
Oh yeah, did they find you yet? Or?
Yeah, they found.
Okay. Yeah.
so. One of the things you were mentioning, which really got you say getting on your face, but prayer life. How's that in a marriage? What would
Very
you?
important.
Yeah, I was going to say, what would you? Was that something that you learned along the way too, or was that something that you had to put a lot of effort into?
I think it's. Well, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I think it's something that we have learned along the way. I'm technically very envious of her prayer life. In the morning, we both do our time with the Lord, and so she has like this
Stack of books, Bible.
books with her, but you also have that big long prayer list,
Oh, yeah.
and so she'll pray a long time
Yeah.
through that list. And I don't have that list. I usually, we get on the church app, and I'll take those out and I'll bring them before the Lord, but I bring all the other issues before the Lord. We both are praying. Many times we pray together when there's a certain, what was it one time somebody had a health situation, and we stopped and we prayed together, and we do all of that.
I think regarding marriage, though, one thing is, in your prayer life, so often people pray to change. Lord, change my husband's attitude about this, change this and that. Would a better prayer not be, Lord, change me? Change my attitude, change the way I react. Because if the Lord changes me, then that changes others around me.
Yeah.
If I'm asking the Lord to work on me, that will curb my frustration with people around me. So, and a lot of times it's amazing that you see that some of the problems you thought you had relationally with people really were part of, they lie in your lap. And Lord, change your heart and your attitude affects the whole situation. And a marriage, definitely.
I think one of the things, too, that proved to Cindy and I the great, great power of prayer is when she had cancer. And our church and many other churches that know us got behind her in prayer. And we believe she's been 6 years without cancer. And we believe that is in response to the prayers. Yes, we had great doctors and such, and very good, probably one of the best doctors I've ever met in my life. But the thing that really...
That was all God too, by the way.
It was.
I always think about,
he's the number one guy in ovarian oncology and all that stuff.
But the thing is, when you go through that and you're referred, in that instance, you're referred to a doctor. I didn't know anything about who to go to or whatever, but we just saw the hand of God all through that. But even in our marriage, tracing the hand of God, getting us through some really hard times in marriage, and because of prayer and relying on the Lord and the power of the Lord to get you through some things in marriage is particularly necessary, I think. When you can't do anything about a situation, it's all in the hands of the Lord, who is sovereign anyway and in control. So, but I think for me, I had, years ago, it occurred to me that rather than pray that the Lord change some things relationally, that really, Lord, change me. That was a turning point for me. And this is probably back in the 80s.
Oh, I love that. When you're saying that, that's really resonating with me right now.
Right, because I thought, I do need to change. I need to change my attitude. I need to change the way I interact, with this person or with him. And so, Lord, change me.
So I joined her in that prayer. Lord, change her.
I do appreciate that.
You're happy to.
Yeah, look at how it's worked.
Yeah. See, the Lord changed him to pray to change me.
I think also, Josh, a very important thing, and my friend Scott here as well, very important thing is that we follow the owner's operator's manual when it comes to marriage. He has given us, for example, husbands a strong command to love our wives in the same way that Christ loved the church, so much so that he died for the church. And so we must love her in the same way that he has loved us. And how has he loved us? Well, he loved us intentionally. It was willful. It was determined. And he pursued what was best for us.
Sacrificially.
Yeah. He made sacrifices in that pursuit of himself.
Right.
And he continues steadfast in that love commitment, even when we frequently back away from it. When we're not loving him as we should, his love for us never changes. And so that's our model about the way we're supposed to love our wives. And the wives are told in the Bible that their role is to line up under the authority that God's delegated to their husbands and to respect them. And the interesting thing has always been to me, the mandate for us to love her and the mandate for her to respect her husband never have a parenthesis after that. Like, well, if he's being a jerk, then you don't have to respect him, or if she's really a nag spending too much on the credit card, then you don't have to love her. No, it's just, this is what you have to do because you're mimicking what Christ does. I would be in terror if my Lord said, guess what? From now on, I'm going to love you with a parenthesis. And here's the things where I'm not going to love you because I'd blow it.
Right.
And so I think that's important that Cindy knows that I love her. I really, really love her. And I would die for her. I would. Matter of fact, one of my prayers on the way home, when I first heard she had cancer and left the doctor, and I was driving back home, had to leave her there because she was going to be operated on. And I remember saying, Lord, I'd rather have you take me than her, because I didn't want her to go through that. And so you got to love your wives to that extent. You have to understand, I know your wife. I don't know your wife as well, but both of you, I'm sure you have treasures.
Oh, yeah.
Wonderful treasures. Right. So they're worthy of our love, when we need to do that. And so I think if you follow that, then you're doing what God wants you to do. You do anything else, you're on your own. If you say to your mate, you have to earn my love, you're on your own. He didn't say that. So you got to be careful in your marriage that the architect of marriage has given us directions and we need to follow them. And if we do that, then we're much better off. And it provides longevity to a marriage relationship.
And security.
Yeah.
Yeah. Knowing that you're respected, knowing that I'm loved. There's that foundation then and that security that though the storms of life come and whatever they are, as they enter your life, you have this foundation.
Yeah.
Well, that's how, when people see you, that's how God wants us to be perfect. How are they supposed to know who you are? By your love.
And it was interesting because one of my neighbors where we used to live came to me one day over the fence, and he said, I want to know something. And I said, sure. He said, we've been living here for a long time and you and Cindy always seem so happy together. How come? Obviously there was probably things going on in your home.
Yeah.
And I told him, I said right away from the very beginning, it's the transformation that Christ has made in our lives. Gave him the gospel message because that's the truth. We're naturally self-centered. That's our natural bent until we're rescued from that by Christ. So Yeah, you're right. I never even knew he was looking at us and saying that, hey, complimenting us the way he did.
And the neat thing is to get to this point in life where we're in our 70s and really like being together and enjoy being together.
Yeah.
Not just tolerating being together, but really enjoying being together and looking forward to doing things together. It's nice. One thing I think is a lot of couples give up when they hit the bumps in the road along the way, the crises, the things that come into life, and it gets hard, and you think, well, we're just going to get divorced. I'm just going to leave. But I have found, and we have found, that if you weather those storms and work through them, narrow your way sometimes through the storms of life, you get to this side of them, and you have the sweetness that comes because you've endured those storms of life together, and they didn't take you down, they didn't destroy you, but you got through them together.
Cindy and I came from very bad, dysfunctional families. Where alcohol was involved with her dad, with my dad. So we never saw it modeled.
No.
But the good thing is that even when we were unsaved, both of us, unbeknown to each other, said in our hearts, we don't want this.
I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to live like that.
We were insecure as kids because my mom would talk about divorce all the time. Every time he got, intoxicated and started fighting and yelling and screaming, she'd talk about divorce. And I remember laying there when I was about 8 years old or something, actually asking myself this question, who would I choose to go and live with?
Right.
That's sad.
And I'm 8 years old.
That's a sad thought.
Yeah, because I thought by the end of this week or so, this whole thing's going to be over. And so it's so good when, like my boy, here's the good news about what Christ did in our family. My boys have never seen that. They have never seen, me push their mother up against the wall and, threaten her and stuff like that. I've seen that, but they have never seen that. And same thing within Cindy's house, which was a mess as well, So that's a good that's a good thing. God gives you grace to function that way, and you give your family grace by the security.
Right.
Kids always know when there's trouble. They know it.
Right.
And parents do well to try to hide it, but they know.
No.
We knew it.
We knew it. Yeah.
They would try to hide it from us, but
Yeah.
of course the yelling and the screaming really,
They weren't trying to hide it too much.
Yeah, right. That's pretty obvious.
Yeah.
Wow.
No, that's good. Were there bumps when you were raising the kids? I mean, what were some of the things that along the way? And I also have to imagine running a church, starting a church, dissension in a church is always guaranteed because you got fallen people, right?
Right, always.
So, and I have to imagine people have probably gone to you to try to convince him that he was in the wrong, right? I mean, I've been in ministry, I understand some of these things. So what were some of those things that you guys learned along the way that had to be rock solid during those times, whether it be child raising, whether it be in your case, starting a church, and other people would be starting like a business, right? I mean, there's a lot of, you're taking a huge risk, a big jump when you do that, and it may not be successful, and but you're trusting the Lord in it all the way through. And if it's not successful, it's because He has a purpose in it. But all that. How did those things shape you?
Well, our first two boys were, as far as their church experience, was when he took his first pastorate in Illinois, in the north suburb of Chicago. That was their formative years, and us working through that kind of parenting when our boys were young. And he was his first pastorate, and it was very demanding.
I used to work 80 hours a week.
Yeah.
Because I was a one-horse show. I mean, I was doing everything. I didn't have any associates or anything like that. And I was counseling and preaching and teaching other classes and stuff, working on developing leadership. And the only thing I have to regret about that is I did not spend enough time with my first two boys. To the point of where you developed a really solid connection. My youngest son, we have both a very solid connection with that. And my oldest son, when we moved to St. Louis, he was 18?
18, just graduated from high school.
And he said to us, no, I don't want to move. I don't want to move. But he came with us, And then he was causing trouble in the family. He was breaking the family, standards. And I remember him arguing with me, like, why do you have all of these standards? I said, well, I really, Mom and I didn't come up with them. This is what the Lord has come up with. And we love you. I said, I love you. And he said, well, why do you have to love me so much?
So those years.
And I said, that was tough. And then he kept on violating, he was in 19 or so, and he kept on violating the standards. So Cindy and I, the toughest thing we ever did is we sat down and talked with him and said, we're sorry, we have 2 more kids to raise. If you're going to live independent of our standards, then you're going to have to live on your own. Now, fortunately, there was an elder in Illinois from our previous church who knew David very well and said, have him come and live with me if he wants to come back to Illinois. And he did. So he lived with Mike, an elder, good man. And he liked Mike, and Mike loved him. But that was the hardest thing we ever did. But we had to do it because he was becoming his own young man, and he just refused to comply with the standards that we had. He was coming in when he wanted to come in. We told him, you're still under our roof, and we have certain, time limits. And I even had two of our elders at that time here at New Community. I said, I want you to interview David, and I want you to find out if Cindy and I did anything wrong in our parenting, because I believed if we did wrong in our parenting, then we'd have to fix that and not be a part of the elders until we got that fixed. And so they did. They met with him, and he met with them for a long time. And basically what he said is, hey, my parents' faith is real. They're good people and loving people. I just don't want it. I just don't want Christianity.
And his words were, I want to do what I want to do.
I want to do what I want to do.
So, I mean, those
Has he come back since then?
No.
Not quite.
No, I mean, he's a very responsible man. He's 50.
Or 50, he'll be 55 this year.
He is a counselor for the military, works with people with post-traumatic stress for the Air Force. So he's an accomplished young man. He absolutely adores his mom. He's got a good relationship with me, but he looks at me more like the disciplinarian guy. But he absolutely loves her. And so he's not adversarial to us, or any of that.
But I mean, those times put a real strain on marriages.
Oh, yeah.
When you go through any of that kind of stuff, then you may be looking at things from a different perspective, husband and wife, how do we handle this? What do we do? And, for a lot of married couples, it's those kind of times, those really hard kind of times that really put the strain on the marriage and really cause a lot of friction. So,
I was interested as to why he did that, the dynamics of it, because as I said before, one of the requirements of an elder is that he manages his family well. Managing implies you're going to have stuff to manage. That means not everything's going to go well. Because when he becomes an elder over a church, what does he have? He has a company of redeemed sinners.
Right.
So he's going to have to manage that. And if he doesn't do a good job in his home, how's he going to do a job on that bigger scale? And so you have to find out, was there any of the parenting style or principles that I used that produced this? And that's what I was trying to find out. And the conclusion of the elders was no. They didn't find anything that they thought was a reason for. If anything, they commended us on the way we parented through that time. But that's why I was saying earlier, it's important that we understand, and we're a little careful about being judgmental about people and their family and their children, because there are dynamics that may be under their control or may not be under their control. You can do everything right and have a bad situation happen in a family. There's a very, very, very well-known, I won't name him over the air, very well-known minister and head of a Christian college and everything else. I came across his son He has 5 kids. I came across his son, who was 36 when I came across him. And he was sent by his father to see me because he was working for a publishing company. And you know the money they give you when you're a salesman, the
Commission.
it's not the commission.
Expense account.
It's expensive. He was using that to buy drugs and then selling it. And he sold drugs to a federal agent. So he was in big time trouble. So that's when he came to me to see me. And we worked together, and he came to a true saving relationship with Christ. He was very fortunate in that situation because he didn't, that was the only time he ever got caught with that. He did lose the job, which was a very nice job. But, here was this guy, and he, suddenly is flipped around. He loves the Lord. But his family, I know his family. I can't think of 2 more godly people than his mom and dad.
Right.
The most godly people I've ever met. 4 of their kids are all in ministry. But George was not.
Yeah.
So, same parents, same love, same principles, different turnout.
Yeah, I have an elder that really spoke to me through most of my life, and in fact, I think my mom's visiting him right now.
Yeah.
Down in the Springfield area. But
Yeah.
he had very similar. Loved the Lord, one of the most godliest, patient people you'll ever meet in your life. And yet 3 really good kids, and then one that was the prodigal, right? I mean, just
But it is.
and all 3 of them really were in ministry. 2 actually full-time ministry, and 1 ran a Christian bookstore. So
The reverse can happen too.
Yes.
Ungodly
We've
produces
seen that.
godliness.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I there's a,
And when we were up in
Fox Lake, Joey, I almost said his name.
Hush.
Over there. Yeah.
yeah, never.
Anyways, his family was a disaster. His father was a complete alcoholic. His mother was a graduate from Moody, but she married an unsaved man. And, I would go to his house, and his dad had started these jobs, had an old house with plaster walls, and he tore them out. He was tearing out from the inside, and there were big gaps where the air was coming into the house. It's winter, it's freezing. And this young man who was in my youth group was raised in that. But I was discipling him. He loved the Lord. He loved the Word. And he had no models whatsoever.
No model.
None.
Horrible home.
Horrible home. And here's this young man. That we moved away. We came out here, and I didn't see much of Joey until Ronald Reagan was coming out of the White House, and one of the Marines opening the door was Joey. Well, I won't say, I almost said his name, but he was one of the Marines.
That's cool.
I had a story kind of like that where
Yeah.
I had a youth when I was out in St. Clair that grew up 2 homes, both of them. One, dad gave him a car, mom gave him a car. Dad said he couldn't stay with him if mom gave him a car. Even though they both were remarried and had kids, mom didn't have any room for him because he'd been living,
Right.
So he actually wound up moving in with me for about 6 or 8 weeks. Radically came to know Christ. I actually met him because I showed up at his youth group, and all the youth were gone. They had a youth council hire me, and I show up, and they're all like in camps and everything. And I'm like, I got to find youth, right? So I'm driving, and I see a bunch of kids running along the side with their shirts off, together. And I pull my pickup truck a little ahead of them, and I get out, and I go, hey, can I buy you guys something to drink? And there was a little stand there, and got them something to drink, and I just started opening up. One of them's mom owned the video store down the street, and then I met Justin. Well, my story about that, because it was interesting, you said about Reagan, he wound up changing his, he had been recruited by Mizzou, turned from Mizzou and decided to play for an Assembly of God college down in Springfield area, Evangel, I think it was, and then I get and I stayed in touch with him every now and then. He would handwrite me a letter. I didn't get very many. Email was just starting to come around, but I would get handwritten letters from Justin, and I still got them. And one day I get one, and he goes, "Hey, just want to let you know I'm leading a Bible study for the 49ers. They drafted me."
Oh.
He was a walk-on and got picked up by the team, and wound up playing for the 49ers, the Washington Redskins, Tampa Bay. And then he actually got injured when he was at Tampa, and had to recoup and was playing for the Arena League.
Well,
And wound up getting hit and having a brain aneurysm that night
boy.
and passed away.
oh my.
Left a wife and 2 kids.
Jeez, Josh, I did not expect that.
Don't lay that on me.
But everywhere he went, he would write me these letters.
Better off than me now.
But that about how everywhere he went, he was leading the Bible study for this team. He was involved in the community place here, and he was just always, wherever he went. And I would go online every now and then, and he would be recognized for the team by the team. He was not a big player. He was just a kickoff return guy that, was basically one of the last guys on the team type of deal. So he had very little role, not really recognized a ton. But the one thing would always be wherever he went, you would always see like community guy, led Bible study, or led a group study, or whatever the hell the NFL would have worded for that team. But you'd look and you'd find little clips about him, and I always thought that was really
Very
cool
good.
about him.
Very
so
The thing you learn is there's no guarantees about your children, because each of us, will make a choice or not to live for ourselves, to turn to the Lord. So, when they're little, they can be involved in church, they can be involved in all kinds of Christian activities, and you think everything's great, but then they come of age where they make their own life, their own decisions, and you can be greatly disappointed. How do you in a marriage handle that? So that's, those are the things of life that, you work through, and then you get to the other side of those things. Then you face new things, because there's always something to, some challenge.
There's no family package when it comes to redemption.
Right.
You have to come on your own. Each person in your family has to come on their own.
Right.
And there's no guarantee that they all come. You hope that they do, but you pray that they do. You pray hard for all of your kids. You continue to pray for your kids. Now my kids, I pray for them, but I also now pray for my grandkids. And now I also pray for my great-grandkids.
Yeah.
So, you keep getting more.
Yes.
It's the thing about you.
More kids.
You finally get your kids to leave your home, but they come back with more people.
Yeah, they do.
Multiply.
It's like,
Yeah, they do.
So
Joy, it really is a joy, and it's worth all the struggles and all the, the years of all the ups and downs we've had. Working through things and seeing God being faithful and working in spite of us. A lot of times working in spite of us. But, you come to this point in life now, and there's a sweetness to having weathered the storms, kept your feet on solid ground with the Lord, come what may, deal with things, and then you get to this point where now there is a sweetness to this time that's, I think, a benefit of having weathered all those storms with the Lord and any storms that come up in the future. We have no doubt that God will take care of whatever it is. No doubt about His sovereignty and
I knew things are
His love.
changing in my relationship with my boys, who are now men with their own families. When we moved to the new house that we're in now, 2 of my sons were there, and I started helping. There was a bunch of guys from the church. I mean,
they were all helping you move everything. They're awesome, aren't they?
yeah, unbelievable. So they're moving, and I started moving, and my 2 sons are saying, "No, Dad, we don't want you to be moving anything. Just go sit in the kitchen."
go sit down.
So I did, and I finished most of the pizza that.
That's awesome.
Yeah, they're in a
Time
theme
of
with
life
pizza.
now, when your kids are concerned about your well-being and
It's so weird.
what they can do for you.
Yeah.
It's just, it's good, different, but
I was going to ask you something. Is there common things that you find that take the romance out, or that women do? I know you've talked to a lot of women. Obviously, you are a woman, but I mean, I'm sure women come to you for counsel. Are there common things you find that women commonly come to you and you say, this is what you need to do?
Well, I think women, because a lot of women are more emotional, rely on their emotions. They can tend to whine. I just can't think of a better word. But they whine a lot about things that are not worth, like I said before, not a hill to die on. Choose the things that are very important to make your point on or whatever. But I think you can get a little too nitpicky. Women compare their husband to other women's husband or some other And my husband's not that way. Oh, he would never think of doing that for me, and then you start to become discontent, comparing. For women, I think comparison's a big thing. And a lot of them talk about their relationships, and you can compare your husband, the one you got, to the one maybe you wish or the kind you wish you would have gotten, and he's not like that. But learning to trust the Lord with your marriage situation, whatever it is, or your disappointments, allowing the Lord to use you, but also to do his work in the heart of your husband if there's things that do legitimately need to change. But I think women get too much into comparison, and it breeds discontent with where they're at in life, what they have in life, who they have in life. I just think that it's kind of common for women to do a lot of comparison, and then really be out of that, be discontent with what they have. Wishing, I wish my husband would do that. My husband doesn't. I think social media obviously doesn't help.
Right, right.
And so there's a lot of comparison, and then you're going to be discontent with what you have because he's not perfect. I'm not perfect. There are things in me that he has to put up with. There's things in him I have to put up with. But, I think being gracious, cutting him a little slack, for the Lord to work in his life and communicating with him, things you see. I think a lot of women too, a lot of marriages probably don't have the depth of communication that's really beneficial. They don't get, a lot of people don't get too far below the surface about a lot of their gut level feelings. Some things that are hard to talk about, but they never get there as a couple. And it's, when you can do that and be very honest with each other as a couple, that's very helpful to bring about those, refining each other through the Lord. But I like that. The Lord refine each other. But I think the big thing for women is comparison.
Comparison, yeah. The grass always looks greener on the other side until you take a step into manure.
Okay.
That's right. And it still has to be cut.
Yeah.
My mother divorced my dad, and then she remarried. I always 3 or 4 times. I kind of lost track. That's sad, but somebody else would be better. Somebody else would be better, and always that there was something better out there that she felt she didn't have. So, but you have what you have. So, enjoy what you have. Work on what you have. Be gracious and patient with each other as you work on what you have. And just thank God you have what you have.
Well, and it makes it easier when the man has a servant attitude and he's trying to outserve you, right? I mean, always that's so important.
That takes time, too.
I was going to say, one of the things that I commonly hear in marriage when there's difficulty, and it's based on the 2 commands that you find in Ephesians 5:25. Husbands, love your wives, 5:33. And wives, see to it you respect your husband. And a lot of times in a marriage situation, I turned to a lady once and said, are you sure that your husband really loves you? And she said, loves me? I'm not sure he likes me. Because, it was constant complaining. And then I've also had men say, my wife does not respect me. And she treats me like I'm one of the kids. So he said, I don't want to be married to my mother. I already had a mother. So you have people leaving these roles and they're corrupting their marriage relationship. And it's the obedience to the idea of love and the idea of respect.
Right.
And if you have those 2 things and you're honoring that, things go much better. And your wife knows he really does love me, and he knows she really does respect me.
Another great book, by the way, Love and Respect.
It is a good book.
Yeah.
Good book.
It's a good book, and it does cover that, pretty well. But it's there in why do you have those 2 mandates? They're both imperatives. They're commands.
And just to clarify a little bit, maybe if a wife isn't giving respect to the husband, that doesn't necessarily always mean that he's respectable and
yes
is that is he always due respect, or is it the
right
word that
Great.
give respect where respect is due.
He is always worthy respect because of the position he's in the family.
Okay, that's what I just wanted to clarify.
But it really helps when he's respectable, you know. But it's the same thing about the love of the woman. She must be loved because she's your wife, but she's not always lovable.
Right.
You know, that happens as well. But you don't, in other words, here's the key. I don't have a right to disobey God in that command if she doesn't obey God.
Right.
In other words, it doesn't give me, okay, she's not respecting me. That's it. I don't have to love her. No, that command was directed to the husband. The command to respect your husband was directed to the wife. There's nothing, you know, there's no conditions on that. So.
Yeah, I see a lot of that. When that happens, often we'll hear the man say, well, then I'm just not going to provide for her anymore. She's going to have to go get a job. And a woman says, well, he just ain't going to get sex anymore.
Right.
Yeah, that's right.
And then you have these reactions
That's right.
that are absolutely counter to anything dealing with marriage and what God would want.
So can he not love me in spite of me, and can I not respect him in spite of him?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? In spite of the times you blow it, in spite of the times you're maybe not respectable or I'm not really lovable, can you know, you still do it. It's still the undercurrent of how you live.
Yeah.
You know.
A man said to me once in a marriage counseling, I can't love her that way. She'll take advantage of me. You think, oh, something's wrong here, you know. But that's the way the creator of marriage, the one who designed it, the architect, that's what he said needs to happen in a marriage. And so you can't ignore that.
But if he loved her the way he should,
Sure.
it would be easy to respect him.
Yeah.
And if she respected him the way she should, it'd be easy for him to love her. You know, you make it easy if you do those things.
Help each other out
Right.
in the marriage. You act in a manner that's worthy of respect as a man to help her out. And at the same time, she lives in such a way that it's easy to love her,
That's awesome.
you know. So
All right. Well, I think we learned some secrets today. Scott, what do you think?
Yes. We learned some things.
We learned some things. Well, thank you guys. Does he still wash your dishes?
Well,
that's
he
why I do
once in a while.
That's why
Once in
she's
a
got a
while.
dishwasher.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
You know, back in the day, we had no dishwasher. They weren't around. We didn't even have.
I was joking, though.
Then
He does on occasion, or I'll say, "Hey, come on in here and help me do these dishes."
But he still helps you out around the house
He's
now.
willing to if I asked him.
We actually have it's a compact that we made years ago where when we had a 2-story house, because we were fighting so much about, getting the house in order.
Well, we had several animals,
We
and
had
I said,
animals
I
for the
can't do all
kids
this
and all.
vacuuming.
Yeah.
So he said, I'll vacuum, I'll take
lower
care of the
level.
floors on the lower level, and I'll take care of the floors on the upper level.
So we kind of do that now, except for one of our gracious daughter-in-laws. Every 2 weeks comes over and completely cleans our house for us.
it's cool.
Wow.
There you go.
So that's
Have
my
more
reward.
daughter-in-laws.
Yeah, that's my reward for putting up with my son
There you go.
and the grandkids.
Well, that's awesome. Thank you guys so much for being here and sharing that wisdom and biblical wisdom. I'm always trying to soak it in. So we appreciate that. And for those listening, don't forget to support those that support us. Don't forget Brookes Bible College. Don't forget Andy McCallum with Resource One, 636-458-1798. Chris and CS Design at 573-436-3717. And Jeff Earhart for all your insurance needs at 314-821-JEFF, which is 5333. So give those guys a holler. All their info is also in the show notes. We appreciate their support. And with that said, thank you guys for being here. And we'll catch you guys all with the next episode. Happy Valentine's.
Happy Valentine's, everybody.
Yep.
You're safe.